check. There was one mistake in these minutes where we did not have Commissioner Lerby's vote noted as a approval of the minutes from the special meeting on January 13th. So if you can just motion to approve those minutes with that amendment, we would appreciate it.
A motion to approve the minutes with that amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Commissioner Abernathy?
Yes.
Commissioner Anong?
Yes.
Commissioner Argento?
Yes.
Commissioner Emmerich Ford?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Matthews?
Yes.
Commissioner Stacy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Serrano?
Yes.
And Chair Ibanez?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you, Amanda. Do we have any public comments on this agenda item?
We do not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Which is a bit different than the chat. We did look into it. This is a setting that the city uses for town halls and seminars, but it's not used for meetings of the Brown Act bodies, mostly to avoid confusion over how official public comments can be made, similar to the conversation we had 2 meetings ago with the city attorney. But with that said, as a reminder, any member of the public can always email during the meeting, before the meeting, after the meeting, cpoc@cityofpasadena.org, and that correspondence will be given to the commissioners. And as I mentioned during the public comments, as we were looking into this to think about other ways we can make sure we were making the public able to participate as seamlessly as possible, and looking at what other commissions are doing, we did allow the option now, and it's posted on our agenda, for anyone who's listening to the meeting, either on the phone or via Zoom, to use the raise hand feature. So if someone didn't have a chance to submit a speaker card, but is listening to a conversation and wants to give a public comment, we will just look for that raise hand feature. Anyone who's on the phone, it's just you press *9 and that will show us your hand via the Zoom platform here. With that said, public comments will always still be during the designated period for each agenda item. So we'll just be looking for the hands during those comments. The last thing I wanted to update you on is the IPA. An update from last month. At the request of the City Council Ad Hoc Committee for the selection of the IPA, Chair Ibanez has created an ad hoc committee of the CPOC to support the review process for the IPA. The City Council Ad Hoc Committee will be referring a select number of proposers to this committee for them to interview and provide feedback to the Council Committee for them to consider in their further review and eventual recommendations to full City Council. So we're excited for these interviews to move quickly and start next week. So we thank you to those commissioners who the chair selected and for making yourself available on short notice. So we hope to have a further update for you at the next meeting, but that's where the process is right now. If anyone has any questions or things like that, now would be a great time. Happy to answer any questions.
Amanda, thank you for the updates. Do we have an update on Commissioner Kanaga's replacement?
I don't have an update other than I know that the council member is looking into reviewing applications, and the hope is to get that recommendation of a nomination to council this month, which would be March. With the hope then, I think that we could hopefully have a commissioner at our April meeting.
Thank you.
When, if there's no other comments, we'll just make sure there's no public comments this item. We don't have any via the public speaker card, but we'll just give anyone a moment who would like to speak via the raise hand feature.
Commissioner Jones.
Good evening, everybody. With the replacement for Kanaga, because we all did our training, our 30 hours with PD all together, and of course we have other trainings that'll be coming forward. Do we have any idea what that'll look like? This person, will they be able to kind of jump in and do training on their own time, or would we be waiting for them to complete 30 hours? You know, do we have an idea of what that will look like for the replacement person? I know we have a unique circumstance because the rest of us all started at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thankfully, the trainings that you all took, the virtual ones were recorded. So the new commissioner will be able to catch up on for his own time watching those. And then there will be the portion that you all did in person. Commissioner Stacy has actually nicely volunteered to join that commissioner, so the person is not alone. And Frankie and myself will also probably join, since we were not here in staff at that point either, to make sure there's a little bit of a team involved. And then the other requirement is obviously the ride along. So we'll have to look into, I think the commissioner can probably start joining before all of that training is complete. We'll just have to double check that so we can make sure it's as quick as possible.
Thank you, Amanda.
I don't believe we have any public comments. Is that correct, Frankie? We have no public comments. If there's nothing else on that item, Chair, I leave it to you.
Thank you, Amanda. We will now proceed to update on discussion of Pasadena Police Department's body worn camera policy and upcoming changes.
I will leave that. Chief Moody should be here to speak to you on that. I will just let everyone know for the public that we have Commissioner Lurvy here now. Welcome, coming joining us at 6:14.
Good evening, commissioners. How are you all?
Good evening.
Amanda, staff.
Hi.
So I had one slide for my presentation. Do you have it there, Frankie?
I'm going to bring it up for you right now.
Okay, so basically while he's doing that, oh, there it is. So I just wanted to update you all on some additions to our current body worn camera. And we will also use this information to update our policies. So in the next few months, we'll have our upgraded body worn cameras, which is Axon 3s. And the additions to that body worn camera or additional features is that we'll have the performance software, which allows supervisors to go in and look at data of how officers are or are not turning on their cameras. And then the other thing is it's the Signal Sidearm. So Signal Sidearm is an app which activates whenever an officer pulls his weapon from the holster, his or her holster. And any officers within about 20 feet of that officer, their cameras will also activate. And we think this is important. Like, there have been a couple of incidents in which the officer failed to either turn on their cameras because of the stress of the situation or whatever was going on with the officer, and they did not turn it on. This is a little bit more protection in that any officers around them, if a weapon is pulled, the cameras will come on. Currently, when their tasers are pulled, the officer that pulls the taser from their holster, the camera comes on. But with the tasers, that does not, the other officers within 20 feet do not come into play. So we think this is a great added feature, and it helps us when there's a critical incident and the officer involved is either too stressed out or something is going on that he or she fails to turn on their camera. So this gives us extra, I don't want to say protection, but it gives us an extra sense of security that other cameras are going on. Are there any questions? And again, before you ask your question, this will be updated in our policy. And once the policy has been updated, I'll be sure to give Amanda a copy for you all so you'll know what the changes have been to the policy. Now, any questions? Oh,
Commissioner Argento? You're muted, Commissioner.
So, yes, thank you, Chief Moody. Are there any plans to get similar ability in the taser, so that if a taser is pulled, the officers within 20 feet of the officer who pulls the tasers will also have their cameras go on? Is that being considered?
not at this time. Taser does not have that as one of their features, but they may design something to that effect in the future. And I think it's because tasers are not considered necessarily deadly weapons, so to speak. So we don't have that. They don't have that feature as yet.
Thank you.
Commissioner Anand?
So could you, because I'm pretty much a visual person, could you kind of walk, I know what you're saying, that if a firearm is offloaded from an officer, then the camera, could you maybe do a scenario for me? Like, just like, it's a car stop, you know, how does it, because you saying it and maybe just seeing a scenario is a little bit better for me.
So let's take the shooting on Sunny Slope.
Okay.
So there was a suspect who was shooting at the officers. The officers returned fire, and you could see the image. You could see the shooting because there were residents who had cameras. We got those cameras. And then there was the officer who was actually firing, and you had his camera was on, but you had a more narrow view. So now you have all these other officers who are around him whose cameras also go on. So you have a larger picture, a larger view of what's actually occurring.
And so you're going to have his camera, and then you're going to have their lens, their camera, and then whoever, and their camera. So
Right.
you'll have 3 different videos to go off of.
Or many different views. It could be more than 2, 3. If there's 5 officers standing around, 5 officers' cameras are going to come on.
So however many officers are there, and what's the ratio of range to make it trigger? So say if the officer is like, 200 feet away, all the other officers, and this officer is 200 feet away from the others, is him pulling out is still going to trigger them 200 feet? When does it line up?
It's 20 feet.
Oh, so they got to be 20 feet, and then it kicks in. So say if they're 200 feet away and they're running towards him, does it mean that when they get to him at 20 feet, that their cameras come on?
Yes.
Okay. This is better. Okay.
There was
So the minute they get into range of the officer who has offloaded his weapon, their camera will come on.
Right. So there's a signal when a weapon is pulled. It signals the other cameras within that where the signal has been activated. So if I come up on the officer and he has pulled his firearm, I'm within 20 feet, my camera's going to come on.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. There was one other
And
feature.
I know this may sound like an idiot question, but if the officer, I'm not saying that they would, but if the officer knows that if I get to 20 feet and the camera goes on, does that mean if they stay 20 feet away, their camera won't go on?
I could imagine. Right.
So if they stay within range, their camera won't go off. Their camera won't go off. But if they step into range, their camera goes on.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Vice Chair Serrano?
Sure, I want to make sure. It sounded like the chief had something else she wanted to add, though. I want to make sure that.
Yes, I did want to add, there's something that's got another feature is called video recall, which means we could look at an officer's camera and go back almost 18 hours of video footage. But there won't be audio, right? But the feature, the way it is now, because their cameras stay in like standby mode, standby. And so the cameras are almost constantly running. So if you need to go back, if there's a critical incident and the officer, and we need to go back and look at his camera, we can go back as far as 18 hours. So that's a really great feature for us right now. And for transparency in a critical incident.
Commissioner Emmerich Ford.
Oh, I'm sorry. Chair, may I go now? Sorry, I wanted to.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's okay. No worries. So, Chief, thank you so much for this update. I'm really excited to hear how technology is sort of meeting some of our needs in terms of increasing transparency around transactions between the police and the community. I would love to know if you can share a little bit, though, about what we're doing with our officers to ensure that they manually turn on their cameras in transactions that do not include any use of force. Can you, because I just know that also sometimes there are those moments where maybe a taser or a firearm is not drawn, but the situation has escalated and recordings of that would be valuable. How do we work with our office to ensure that they manually tap their body-worn camera so we can get recordings?
So the cameras now, you have to physically turn them on and then tap them. With the Axon 3, which is coming in the spring or a couple months, they stay in standby mode. So they'd have to literally turn it off. So the cameras will always be in standby mode. And if something were to occur, they just tap it instead of trying to turn it on and off. And again, like I said, we have the video recall. So it can go back. We won't have sound necessarily, but we will have footage. So I say that to say now with the current cameras, they have to physically turn it on, right? Turn it on and then tap it. With the new cameras, they just have to tap them. There's no manual manipulation of on and off.
So that certainly makes it easier on officers because they're not now trying to have to do two tasks, right, before
Correct.
Right? A transaction that they know they may want to record. Yet they're still responsible for one action, which is that tap.
Correct.
I imagine that still in some situations, things get sort of ahead and they don't have the opportunity to tap. What do we do in those situations to sort of better train our officers to be mindful of taking that action? Or what are sort of the actions taken sort of in our post-situation examination of how things were handled? Like, how do we go back to officers and sort of instruct them better on how to prevent that from happening again, their failure to tap the camera?
Right. So what we're seeing is in excited situations or stressful situations, many times the officers think they're hitting their cameras and we find that they're not, or they're running or whatever, and they're trying to hit the cameras. So what we're doing now is making it a part of the training. So we'll put scenarios together. And many of you saw that. You get in a police car, you get out, somebody's approaching you. We're trying to make it a muscle memory. So we're just doing immersive training in that. So continuous, turn on your camera. That's part of the test, right? When we do the training, if they don't turn the camera on, they have to start over again. We're trying to make it muscle memory. So it's just repetitive training.
Thank you, Chief.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Emmerich Ford.
Hi, Chief Moody. I just want to clarify or better understand something. So when you talked about if you step out of the 20 feet, now that the camera has the recall memory, if you're out of the 20 feet, but you were initially in it, but you've moved back now, does it stay in recall mode? Will the camera stay on? Do they need to tap it to turn it off?
I believe they're going to have to tap it.
So the camera would stay on once they're in the 20 feet, even if they move to the 200 feet, the camera would still be rolling unless they tap it to turn it off.
Correct.
Okay. And in the spring, when you talk about the cameras coming in, is it a few cameras that are coming in, or is it for all officers at that point in the spring will have this new camera?
For all officers and detention officers.
And then at the end of their shift, are all of the cameras turned in and downloaded immediately to be able to grab that 18-hour video footage if needed, a week later?
Yes, they turn them in, they put them in the battery chargers, which downloads them at the end of their shift. And it also charges their battery.
Okay.
So yes, they
Yeah.
dock them at the end of every shift.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Matthews?
Yes, just a point of clarification. Regardless of the scenario where one officer draws his weapon and the camera comes on and you come into that 20 feet, if other officers draw their weapons and they're beyond that 20 feet, their camera should come on. Is that correct?
If they draw their weapons, their cameras would come on, and anyone within 20 feet of them, their cameras will come on.
Okay. And the only way those cameras will go off is that they manually turn them off.
Right.
But if they get back into that 20 feet of the original camera that's on, it's going to automatically.
It's going to come back on.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be no. Oh, Commissioner Stacy?
This is pretty much, I think, clarifying, I hope, what was just asked. So if you have 5 officers, no matter where they are, if they all draw their guns, and the incident on Sunny Slope had multiple officers with guns drawn, anybody within 20 feet of any officer with a gun drawn would get turned on whether they had drawn their gun or not, correct?
Correct.
So there could be many, many officers in the general area, but not within 20 feet of the original person that first drew their weapon.
True. So had we had these cameras on Sunny Slope, we'd have a ton of footage because a lot of officers pulled their weapon because this was almost a running gun battle. Mm-hmm. And so you had a lot of officers who had their weapons drawn. So we would have had a lot of footage from that particular scene.
Okay, so you could have a much wider range if multiple officers have drawn their weapons.
Correct. And
okay.
You get different angles and different views as well.
Yes, just wanted to make sure that I understood that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Argento? You're muted, Commissioner.
Here we go. With regard to the Axon camera, the process by which that particular product is selected, what does that involve? And for example, like does the state, the post-training designate, here's an approved list of cameras that do this kind of thing? Or is it a different process involved where you do your own individual consulting with different companies?
Yes, we did our own individual consulting when we went to the cameras 5 years ago. And so we went with Axon, and this is an upgrade to the one we purchased 5 years ago. So every few years they give us an upgrade, which I believe is outstanding because as technology grows and gets better, we get better. Our technology and our transparency, our forms of transparency gets better. So I think this is great. I think it's going to be really good. Yeah.
There seems to be no further comments at this time, so we will move forward to the next agenda item.
Well, actually, Chair, we do have a public comment on this item.
Thank you.
I believe Alan Shea. Mr. Shea, I will have Frankie add you to the meeting room, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. One moment. Mr. Shea, if you unmute yourself, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Thank you. You have 2
Okay,
minutes.
sorry about that.
No problem.
Thank you, Chief Moody. I'm so glad you are shining some light on our technical challenges that we've experienced. I was wondering, in the evolution aspects of this, what will be the policy application in regards to if officers are found not to comply with the technology working properly for some other reason than what you shared with the commissioners. I say that because I like the fact that you brought up the shooting off Sunny Slope, but in contrast to the one on Raymond, that one clearly showed what had transpired, but there seemed to be some disagreement as to what the video actually substantiates. And I think for clarity, moving forward in the future, it would be sound to have validation that what is captured on video is actually what's captured on video. So can you shed some light on that?
Well, if I can't get to any specific personnel matters, right? So if the officer doesn't follow the policy as far as the camera, then it's a policy violation. But I can't speak on any specific officer involved shooting or something involving particular officers or an incident that occurred.
Well, the question was more directed toward a policy, not so much.
I'm sorry, if I can interrupt. A point of order. This is public comment. Am I correct?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair.
I just want to be mindful of addressing questions at this point.
Yes, Mr. Shea, thank you for your public comment. This is a time for comments, so the commission and the chief can take your comment, but it is not a time for discussion. So thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And thank you, Amanda. We will now proceed to the next agenda item. And Amanda, I don't know the protocol for pulled items, but
just an acknowledgement that item 7 was pulled from the agenda so we can ensure that staff could have some necessary experts in attendance. But staff does look forward to a presentation on city programs and activities addressing crime and violence prevention, intervention, and enforcement at our April meeting. So with that, we can move on to item 8, which is our commission work plan update and discussion.
Thank you. So ad hoc committee members are free to present any updates that they may have. If there are no updates at this time, that is fine. But if commissioners would like to share, feel free to do so now in no particular ad hoc committee order.
And Chair, if I may just make one comment, you'll see on the work plan in the agenda, it shows some updates just based on the notes we've received from committees who had met, just to provide a general update. Going forward, we'll make those updates every month based on feedback from the meetings and then the month at hand. And we will ask kind of make this a living document at every meeting at the end of this conversation for you to approve the work plan as amended or edited with these updates. So we just kind of keep it rolling. And then when we get to the end, we have a nice document that kind of shows our progress. I just want to make that note.
Commissioner Anand?
Yeah, let me start off with, and Spree, please, Commissioner Spree, sorry, please jump in if I miss anything. Is our first one was training, but we moved a little further than our meeting, which was our training in our ad hoc. We met with, let me start off. Last month, we told you that we're going to do 2 tracks of training. There was going to be a community training, which was going to have, levels of community stuff that we wanted to, history of Pasadena, African-American gangs, Hispanic gangs. And so in our first ad hoc meeting this month, we met with Gary Moody to speak with him to discuss about what it would look like to put on the history of Pasadena and with his team. And so we met with that. And then the other discussion was to have the track that was for our NACO training. Our first meetings, hopefully, will be in April, which will have Brian Williams, the executive director for the Oversight Commission in LA, who will, and he's also a board member of NACO, who will be talking about the journey that they've had for the first 5 years and how they put together, from their beginning, their oversight and the things that they've working through, what they've had to go through, the highs and the lows of it. And I believe in the report, Amanda told you that we couldn't have a closed meeting. So we'll have some kind of, there's options for a training or something like that, because we wanted a meeting that he might be able to talk to us frankly, without, any of the press or the media from LA or anything being able to, take anything that he said, but that doesn't seem to be possible. So, but he will, hopefully in April, give us time, and it may work out to be at the end of one of these meetings, to speak on the first track for NACO. Is that right, Spree? Please tell me if I've missed, Commissioner Spree, if I've missed anything.
No, I think everything you said is
Commissioner
accurate.
Lovely.
But I did have a question that I don't think that I thought about that while we were all in this space together. What would be the difference, like in comparison to our last two meetings of the 30 hours where we were at the heliport and at the range? Like, there weren't cameras there, community wasn't invited, those were isolated. So I think that personally, I just want to know what's the difference, because I did read the email with the explanation and Brown Act meetings and all of that, but just for clarification, like what's different from us being able to be in a space where it's just the commission present?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Christine, if I miss anything and you can clarify, but there's kind of a few different tiers of, there's closed sessions, which would really be this committee together. But there's very high standards of what could be a closed session, and it typically involves litigation and personnel matters. So this commission wouldn't be having those. When you do trainings, they don't have to have the standard postings of a Brown Act meeting like this is every month, where we have to, with 72 hours, notice the meeting, make sure the media knows what the link is, and like make it as transparent as possible. So trainings don't have that level, but they still, in the role of transparency, have to be open in the sense that if a member of the public knows about it and they hear about it and wants to come, they would be more than welcome to come. So it's kind of maybe in between that closed session and a public meeting. So we don't have the same level, like I said, of posting requirements, but it is still open to the public if they so wish to find out and to join.
So then backtracking, the public was notified that we would be at the heliport and at the range in those last two trainings? Like,
I don't know if they were notified, but I think if they knew in course of action that those meetings were known, and someone that if they would like to have joined, they would have been able to. I don't know the details of that, but I could find out more. But that's just kind of the legal advice we've received in terms of what kind of designates the training, where there still needs to be some level of openness. You'll see that sometimes, I think, with even ethics trainings that happen at City Hall. If someone from the public would like to come in and join, they can come in and join. It doesn't typically happen, but that option is available.
yeah, can you let me know what you find out about that part? Because I think that, I don't know, personally in this role as a commissioner, I sometimes those conversations that are allowed to be more candid, he's been where we're going. I think that time in a conversation or at least a learning space where he'd feel more comfortable being more candid with us would be valuable to the integrity of the commission overall.
Completely understand the spirit behind that. Completely do.
Thank you, Linda. I think you covered everything we discussed in training flow, Commissioner Flow.
Commissioner, sorry, I don't know if you were going to go on to a different one. If you are, I just have one other logistical comment about the training, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to, in terms of protocols and standards for getting speakers in for the city, we really appreciate your suggestions and the people and your requests to get speakers. Just so you know, for the city, anytime we have a speaker, there needs to be just coordination on the city side to make sure there's no conflict of interest, to make sure, especially if there's a payment that needs to be happening, there's just a little extra amount of coordination that would need to happen, especially right now since the commission's operating without a budget. So it'll make it a little tricky to bring in any sort of paid speakers for the next few months. I'm not saying it's not possible. It just would need to be coordinated through our side to make sure that works and to make sure it's fair and transparent. We obviously, as a city, have procurement rules and processes for awarding money to it being taxpayer dollars. As we kind of bring in these kind of speakers going forward. I also wanted to note, in terms of NACOL, very exciting to have Brian Williams willing to speak to the commission. We also have talked to NACOL as an organization, and as I think I mentioned last month, who is able to do tailored trainings, longer, kind of maybe even 10 hours, where they come in an hour at a time and offer real training that's tailored to our commission and knowing our restraints, what we have, what we're allowed to do, what our city code says, what our charter says, really thinking about how to train you as a commission to be the best commission you can be. Because that's a very obvious benefit for this commission, I think the city leadership is comfortable moving forward with that, even without the budget. Finding that from general funds in the city attorney's office seems possible. So with the commission's blessing, we are happy to move forward with trying to secure that and starting to tailor the curriculum with the training commission committee's help and get that process started as well.
Okay, so let me, I have to read between the lines of what you just said. So we had that, whatever you just said about the finances, we had that conversation last month, and you had the conversation with us when we met with Mr. Moody, and you had that conversation and said that you would have to go back to the city, and I respect that. But I think I have to say, in full transparency, to the effort and time that our ad hoc committee has done, is that I don't want to get to a place, because it seems like, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, right? I don't want to get to a place where we put things into place, because we had this conversation already that we were going to have 2 tracks. The first one with Brian Williams is the jump off for us for NACOL training, because it comes from a jurisdiction that's very close to us, which is LA. And then we would move on to the trainings that NACOL has, which is what you said. And that's all in line. But the other training, which actually brings the commission and an understanding of why we even have a commission, which is our history and the history of violence interruption in Pasadena, is also very important. So I think I have to say it on record, I would prefer to say that you find out what it is we can do before our ad hoc committee can meet again, and what it is that we're going to be allowed to do, because there's no point in us just being trained as great commissioners if we're not training us to learn the city and the problems that existed of why we're in to be this commission, point blank period. And there's no point in us having an ad hoc committee that is taking 2 hours of our own time to meet with people and discuss with people than to hear in our general meeting, which to me sounds like, yeah, we're going to give you the money for NACO, but we may not give you the money for the training of the community. And maybe I'm hearing it wrong, and I'm okay. You don't even have to push back because it's not about you. I understand, but I would prefer that to happen for us to all get an understanding, especially the ad hoc committee, because we're working too hard to present excellence to my community.
All I'd like to say back is that it's not about not doing it. What I need from this commission is and I think we have the general consensus and direction for staff to look into those speakers. And then I would need to work with you. So for NACO, for example, we have a proposal with a standard contract that goes with it. For any speakers coming from the community, we would need to make sure we have an equivalent kind of proposal type situation, which I haven't seen yet. So we can definitely work with the training subcommittee to get that type of information and then see if there's a cost associated and then make sure we have a speaker who fits the qualifications.
And that's what I'm saying is that Mr. Moody gave you the cost when we had the meeting. And you said in the meeting that you would come back to see what the city had to say. So that's why it's a gray area, because he gave the cost and the answer, and it was to come back to see everything you just said, you said to us in that training meeting. So I'm saying to hear it again is more of I'd rather be able to hear it is whatever the answer the city has for the, is the cost right, or is the cost too much, or is it not a cost? And now we can move on for our meetings moving forward, that we're not asking people out of the community to take time to come and talk to us and then be told that what they've said and whatever they want to charge or their honorarium is now being doubled back, because both of the tracks are very important.
It's not about the cost, but just about having a proposal, some things that we could work through to make sure we have full transparency on what the money would be spent on. So I'm happy to look into that more and talk offline to make sure we are moving forward.
I just wanted to piggyback on what she was saying. It's a very important component to understand the needs of the city, and some of the needs of the city, like the true needs of the city, cannot be addressed without understanding the history of the city at all. Like, NACO can't do anything for us without a certain amount of knowledge of what we really need. And even as the city structure stands now, I don't think that the true needs of the city are being, I don't think a lot of it's not being handled properly, because there's a disconnect from the history of our city.
And know this, and like I said, it's not about you, Amanda, but from what I just heard from you saying is the city has green-lighted NACO, but they're not, but you wasn't sure about the other training. And I'm saying those communications, that's, to me, is as Commissioner Spree said, that's low-key, like, wrong to the time that we've spent. Because that could have been put in an email, or because we met at the early part of last month. So all this month, we never got an email to say that the NACO was fine and the city was fine with it, that we could have discussed, well, why is it not fine with the thing? It shouldn't be in this space to be hearing it to our ad hoc committee. I would prefer, me personally, because I know how hard I'm working on it. And if I'm giving 2.5 hours of my time in the evening to do this and be consistent about it, and make sure that it was early enough in the month so that any other irregularities or things had to come back and forwards, it could have, it could have been dealt with. That's all that I'm saying, is that it can't be yes for one and no for the other. or we have to have a process, or whatever that process is. We've had a whole month we could have gone backwards and forwards on emails to figure out whatever you needed that process, or whatever the city needed that process to be. And I would have, and Commissioner Levy and Commissioner Spree would have worked on to see whatever it is we needed to do to make an understanding of what we need to do to make that easier on your part.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that, and I apologize that it didn't get out sooner. There's a large city and different people involved in conversations, but I will make sure to prioritize that going forward to make sure the committee is in the loop and help us move forward.
Commissioner Levy?
You're muted, Commissioner.
So sorry. I just want to be sure that I'm understanding too, as a member of that subcommittee. So there's no issue with the content being proposed, and the role of the subcommittee was to bring it back to the full committee and let them know that the subcommittee feels that it's important to have an expert come in on the history and all the things that have transpired before the commission ever existed. And so in that regard, that's what we're doing tonight. We're bringing that back to the full committee, and that there may be, in addition, some process. I don't know all the details, but we're going to certainly hear more about it. That's required in order to certify a speaker or an expert coming in. And so we'll hear about that process that we haven't heard about before, but then we can use that clarity and transparency in order to make sure that any additional trainings or things on the two tracks that we have for both the community and for the commission, that we won't be spinning our wheels trying to arrange resources, but then have them fail the process. Did I get that right, or am I misunderstanding any of that?
That sounds right to me. I think the important piece for us to know is exactly what you said, the content. The content you want the commission to be trained on that's within your scope, which this completely is. So we could then, and of course, using your expertise as community members to understand who the good speakers would be. We would just need to then, we have purchase orders and things like that need to get figured out. And again, I apologize for not getting back sooner. I'm learning the process here too, as well as a new employee. So learning how the process for procurement and contracts and all that fun stuff gets handled for the city. So,
well, I'm definitely learning too. So I just wanted to make sure I fully understood. And so I think for the purposes of tonight, the subcommittee feels that understanding the history of the community, the local community, with an expert, preferably from the local community, would be of great importance to help with the training and moving forward. And I, defer to Commissioner Nong and Commissioner Jones if they have any, if I've stated that incorrectly.
Thank you. That is helpful feedback and exactly the kind of consensus we need from the commission to know that, and then staff will now completely go back and work on that not as fun process. So figuring how we can do that with the subcommittee's help.
Commissioner Stacy?
A couple of things. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Fowler, can you please remind us when the city budget starts, the fiscal year?
Yes, it starts on July 1. So the budget process is just starting now to figure out what the budget will be, but the new budget starts on July 1st.
So basically, we are without budget until July 1, and we must make efforts to ensure that our costs are covered by whatever budget is available from other departments.
The city's attorney department is basically absorbing this commission right now and figuring out how we can make it work. Obviously, there's still expenses being made for this committee completely. But that's correct.
Excellent, thank you. The other thing is that I'm looking at the Objective 1, and it's training for commissioners and the police department. And I don't know if it's misspeaking by the ad hoc committee members, but
What?
hang on.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's my understanding are eliciting training from both community personnel and NACOL personnel for the commissioners and the police department. What I've heard several times is training for the community. And I just want to ensure that we are talking about training for the commissioners and the police department. Before anyone answers, I want to say, I think it's also important for training for the community, but I don't believe that particular item is within the scope of Objective 1.
May I respond, Chair?
Go ahead.
Last month, our scope of training was that all of our trainings are to include the, if it was NACO, we're inviting the police into the training. As we have, Officer Moody, as we have probably some other officers who are, listening and participating, listening in the participants or the public tonight. So it's always a bridge between us and the police. And we also said last month, Commissioner Stacy, that the training for the community was the community, the police, and us. And that's why the training for the, say, the history of Pasadena might have to be outside of out of this space. So it might have to be another day outside of the space, because it may be like a 2-hour training, but it would be the invitation that the invitation is, of course, the community is coming to listen, but it is, a training, all of the training. Let me underline that in red, make it caps. All the training is a bridge building between us and the police. So what we learn, PPD is in that space as well. I think that it wouldn't make any other sense if we were just learning it for just us and the community. But also, I would say PPD is a part of our community. So I would never think that when I say community, I'm taking them out. Because if I need the police, I'm going to call 911. And they are in my community, and I hope that they will come. Isn't that right, Miss Moody? And so maybe if you go back to the minutes of the last month, or maybe it was skipped out, but that is a key part in the work, the line piece that you said. I hope that makes it a little bit more clarifying.
Thank you. So what you're saying is that any training for the commissioners and the commissioners specifically would be open specifically to the police department and also members of the community.
Absolutely.
Which makes sense. But the way that I was hearing some of the presentation earlier was that this would be a separate training for the community. And that was my question. So all of the training we're talking about is for the commission with the police department, and as provided also for the community, because we all need to understand the history. We all need to understand what's going on currently. And I just wanted to make sure that I understood that training for commissioners and police department included the community, not made the community a separate training issue.
No, it's just 2 tracks. It's just 2 tracks. Yeah.
And I appreciate your clarification of that, because something tells me there may be other people out there that may have been hoping to have that point clarified. So thank you very much, Commissioner Anong, and I appreciate everyone's input. Thank you.
Commissioner Levy?
So in addition to what Commissioner Nong summarized so beautifully, I think given the Brown Act, that really is the best way to be compliant as well, is to make sure that the community is engaged and the trainings are open to them. So as we try to figure out how to be Brown Act compliant, we are thinking of it just in terms of 2 tracks and not excluding any group. So.
Thank you. I have an update for, I have a question for the city in regards to this, but before I do, I'd like to add an update to my ad hoc committee before I forget. So for mental health, our ad hoc committee would like to add violence interruption as in to the work plans and items within our ad hoc committee. And a general question for the city is, because I've been wondering, how are, whether they're speakers or whether they're agenda items, how are those things determined discussable by the body? Like, exactly is determining these things? How are they being determined? And what happens if the commission disagrees with the city?
That's a good question, and I hope we don't get there. I think the city code talks about what the roles and responsibilities of the commission are. As police oversight, I think it's a focus on what the police is doing. I know we're in that game of where there's a public safety committee as well. So I think the focus is obviously on oversight of police programs and activities, and anything within that range is definitely within. If there became a disagreement, I think it would go to our legal counsel here to see if there was an issue, and maybe even Christine and Justin from Sanders Roberts could help clarify on those situations.
So just to clarify, is it them who determine what is quote unquote discussable or not? Is it the city? Is it you, Amanda? Like who exactly determines this, so I could know what the process is?
I can confirm this, but my assumption would be a conversation between the city manager's office and the city attorney to ensure that everyone there is on the same page as the kind of leaders of the city who report directly to council.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Argento? You're muted.
I'm sorry, I forgot to put the hand down. She just answered my question. It's a conversation, at least initially, a conversation between the city attorney and the city manager regarding whether there would be approval. That's what I understood.
Thank you. Commissioner Anong?
Probably just to piggyback off our chairs and to give everybody an update, was that, while in our ad hoc committee, while we're discussing the mental health, a lot of times it was coming up, as we've all known, we've experienced over the past year and a half in our community, the increase of violence, right? And, in the midst of that, yes, there's police aggression and things that the police have to be accountable, but there's also our community has to be accountable. And those two all intersect. I mean, all of those things are intersectional, right? And so one of the reasons of us thinking about, and I want to make, hopefully to my commissioners and people in my community know this, that when people say like gang prevention and intervention, to me, is a very, very ugly label, because before you even meet the human, you have labeled them whatever they might have or used to have been, right? So I just want to say that that's just like, a bias of you used to be a criminal or whatever. And so I think that the term of learning how as a community we can be violence interrupters, and whether that means in a mental health situation or whether that means in a literal, the pockets of violence that we have in our city, and the people that are doing that. How do we understand that? So I think that for our ad hoc, we just really wanted to get together and say, what are the best practices around other communities, other cities around the United States that are dealing with violence interruption and the mental health issues, and how can they, how can we learn from what these other cities are doing and learn from the best practices and some of the reports and the statistics that are out there, and bring it back to the commission as well as to our PD to have a dialogue about it. Because, as I said, I think a letter was received to the to our commissioners that, there is a coalition of our community that are really discussing this and really thinking about what violence interruption really means, and how violence interruption and how we can start beginning the dialogue with the PPD. And a lot of the times in those learning spaces, we've learned that, mental health is taking a big shot, and also the recidivism is taking a really big thing. So the reason why I'm more breaking it to the whole commission is that's why we just want to get more in depth to be able to come back and give you a report that is not based on intervention and prevention, because, as I said, it's a language that needs to be, as I would say, thrown away, because it categorizes Black and brown people immediately, and it categorizes Black and brown people to be a statistic, not even a human being. And so the language of moving it from that to violence interrupters, a teacher can be a violence interrupter, a parent can be a violence interrupter, a community member. So it doesn't, there's no special title to it. And so I hope that the report that we'd like to bring back to you will be about the best practices and some data and some understanding and some people who can talk about it, who are doing great work around the country that are blending these two things together to see how it can be assessed in Pasadena, and how we as a commission can bring forth some tools to our community, and also some dialogue to the PPD of how can we think outside the box when it does come to violence interruption, because these things are intersectional with the work that we're doing, because we've seen that over a year and a half of that work. And, as a commissioner that works heavily in the community, I stand on the shoulders of a lot of people that, I give total respect to and what I learned from, right? So, it's not about my expertise. It's about the people in my community's expertise, as you've seen on that letter. And I just want us to move forward in thinking about that. And I hope I also want us to move forward in taking out that word gang and putting in a violence interrupter, because language is very important, because language changes sometimes the dimension of our conversation, especially in community to Black and brown people, that we don't need to be labeled something, because a lot of the kids and a lot of the young adults are not in gangs. There's something else going on that is violent, that is causing violence, and it has nothing to do with gangs. And so to label gangs straight away is to put you a statistic as a Black and brown person. And I'm going to push back on that, that I'd rather have the language of violence interrupter as somebody who's an asset of who can, it's not about stopping a bullet, it's about stopping an argument, it's about de-escalation, in emotions. And all of those are tied in with mental health, which is what we've been discovering. So I wrap it up there. Thank you.
And I'll just add that since next month, some staff, I think from the city manager's office, that Program Realize was happy to come and give a contextual conversation. It could lead to a good conversation to have about what, hearing from them, what the city's doing, what this commission can do to support if there's a role for the commission. I think that hopefully would be a good conversation to have and begin that dialogue.
Commissioner Abernathy?
Thank you, Chair Banez. I do have, and Vice Chair Toronto, you may have more to say about this. For our work plan, the group number 2, we know with 2 and 3, there's overlap related to a focus on use of force. And so we did talk about this in our meeting. And Vice Chair, I think they had their meeting, your next meeting was probably after that. Well, I'm not sure about that. But anyway, I think it's helpful for the whole commission to kind of know that distinction, but I also wanted to know where we were with it. And so the main idea is we definitely looked through IPA and Maxey's, the whole listing of the different incidents, what we asked him to provide, and the shootings and the recommendations. So we're looking a little more into policies and procedures broadly, but that also includes use of force. And then of course, the third work group is working specifically on use of force. So when I saw one of the items here, I'm pulling it back up, that we wanted to get kind of clarity so that we have overlapping concerns, but we didn't want to be redundant, right? And so one of the things we were talking about is something that has been noted here is the second bullet, where now I'm reading under work group 3, where the ad hoc committee members have been monitoring the city council discussions with the police department regarding the investigative review process and concern of the length of time it takes a criminal investigation to be completed. So our group, that has gotten our attention as well. And part of our research then that our group is doing, where we're saying we're going to do some more research related to use of force, the bullets under us, it includes some of the timing considerations related to the investigative process. So Vice Chair, I just wanted to be sure. So in a way, what we are saying, we're not only monitoring it, but we're actually going to do some research and maybe have a recommendation. We'll see where that goes. But I wanted to just check on that potential overlap there and where that kind of stands.
No, I think that's right, Commissioner Abernathy, and Commissioner Argento and our Commissioner Matthews and I have not been able to find a date where we can all meet. So, but I'm confident that at least there's this thread between work group 2 and work group 3 and me. And so we can keep those lines of communication very open and making sure that we're not being duplicative, and especially our sort of research gathering and data gathering work to provide some future recommendations. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Stacy?
Sorry, I was writing and accidentally had my cursor over the raise hand. I'm sorry.
Not a problem. Do any commissioners have any final thoughts before we proceed to the next item on the agenda?
There's no final comments, Chair. I'd just like you to keep in mind if there's anything you would like to give a motion on. I think especially just like I mentioned, doing kind of a formal adoption of the work plan and the agenda with the addition. So we can keep this as a living document. It would just be almost a motion to approve the work plan as the updated work plan.
Oh, I see. Yes, I motion to update the work plan with the discussed changes.
I'll second.
Thank you. Commissioner Abernathy.
Yes.
Commissioner Anong.
Yeah.
Commissioner Argento,
Yes.
Commissioner Emmerich Ford,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Lurvy,
Yes.
Commissioner Matthews,
Yes.
Commissioner Stacy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Serrano,
Yes.
Chair Banyas.
Yes.
I just want to make sure we don't have any public comments on this item. One moment, please. We do not have any public comments.
Thank you, Amanda. We will now proceed to upcoming agenda items and next, for the next meeting on April 7th, 2022.
Yeah, it sounds like we have a few items that we'll have to make sure we have enough time to give everything its due. I know we talked about Brian Williams. I know we've talked about the violence disruptors coming and having a conversation there. And then we also had a conversation with Sergeant Scott Jackson, who does the wellness unit, who has some great updates on the work they've done to date since your last training. And when you had your training, I know they were just getting started, and they've actually had a lot of great work since then. So we've had a conversation with her, and she is available to come to the next meeting. So those are just some things to keep in mind as we think about the agenda. If anyone else has anything else they'd like to consider, we can happily do that.
Amanda, for next month's meeting, can we have an update on the full visual presence of the commission, whether that is through Zoom or through meetings in person? Because community members are expressing continued frustration on not being able to put a face to the entire commission. And I know we're going through some transitional periods right now, but can we have a substantive update for next month's meeting on what that will look like for the rest of the commission?
Yeah, I think that should be no problem. I think, from my understanding, council is going to be bringing that up before your next meeting. So that would obviously always come down from council, so I can definitely make a note of that. I imagine we do not have any public comments on this item. We do not have any public comment. If there's nothing further, Chair, I think you leave that in your hands to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, everybody, for your time. I look forward to our next meeting. Have a good night, and meeting adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.